Actually, if you've got a Bet365 account, Bet365 came out of Europe. Europe is a really mature gaming market. And if you look at the mature legal European gaming market, then you come across the pond to Canada and the US. So the US, we would have called that a black market up until very recently, where you would have been in a lot of trouble if you'd been trying as an operator come in and sign up players and offer your products. Whereas Canada, by contrast, has been and continues to be a gray market, which means the activity is not regulated. Operators are not coming in and getting licenses and paying tax, but Canada's also, the provinces aren't prosecuting anyone for being in Canada. So Canada, you know, as a contrast to the US right now, because the US is going state by state by state. We just saw New York announce its interesting model. Those are what we would call greenfield expansions. So there's not been sports betting in those states prior to those markets opening. Whereas, you know, from the show of hands that went up in the room, you could have had a Bet365 account or a Paddy Power or William Hill or whomever account for the last 10 years in Canada, and you would have been, you know, off doing your betting, and, you know, nothing would have been interfering with that. So it's just right now, Ontario is jumping in and trying to catch up because the world has kind of moved on without it. So Ontario will now be the first province to license and regulate all forms of gaming. It's not just the sports betting, it's the online, it's the horse racing, it's everything. But the change to the criminal code just means that it's now legal across Canada to offer or bet on a single event, but because gaming is regulated by province, it is up to each and every province to decide what products they want to offer and when they want to offer them.
So in Ontario, who will have authority for overseeing sports betting?
That will be the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. So if the three of us decide we want to offer some sports betting and we've got a company, we've got a product, then at the end of September, you could have started the licensing application. So the window is open, and companies have started to put in their applications already. So you just have to come in and go through the due diligence process, pay your $100,000, and you will get a license.
You mentioned earlier that Europe has a fairly mature betting ecosystem. How does Canada's current system before the amendment compare to what's going on in the U.S.? Because you made a comment about New York. And I think most of the people in the crowd would think that there's more sports betting in the U.S. than perhaps there is. There were some recent court decisions in the U.S., I think 3 years ago now, but in the fullness of time, that's still pretty recently. So maybe tell us where things are at in the U.S. and how it compared to Canada.
I think the U.S. is going, I mean, the U.S. is very much like Canada. Every state that decides to jump in will put its own regulations in place. So the challenge is if you're an operator coming in trying to get licensed, you're dealing with different regulations, different tax models, different structures. So Ontario, by contrast, is going to be the most open market between Canada and the U.S. So you are not having to tether to a land-based casino. They're not limiting the number of licenses that it will award. And they are going to be allowing just almost every product to be bet on. So there will be live in-game wagering. There will be wagering on esports. So you go into some states and that's not available yet. So I think the other part of that too, Trevor, is I think Ontario, because we'll speak just about Ontario right now, Ontario is a very mature gaming market. It's just it hasn't been regulated or licensed, but it's got a lot of experience, or the customers here have a lot of experience with those products already.
What are some of the objectives that the amendment is seeking to address, maybe some of the evils that existed in the pre-amendment stage of sports betting in Canada?
So specifically, it is the match fixing and the problems with, you know, Steve mentioned the sort of organized crime that people were using to go and, you know, place their bets with. You know, that wasn't the universal truth, but when you don't license and regulate, you don't know who the operators are, you don't know what responsible gambling controls they have, you don't know how their payments when people are trying to cash out their winnings, you know, are going to work. So at least there are standards that have to be met, but a lot of them, especially when you come towards, you know, looking at the societal or for the benefits of society when it comes to this, it's really on one side the responsible gambling protocols that will be in place, and the other side, and this is something Michael can speak to as well, it's really having the ability to make sure that if any bets are being placed, they are fair, they're safeguarded, there's honesty and integrity involved in them, because every sportsbook operator that comes in and gets a license will have to work with an integrity monitor, just to make sure that there's nothing illegal happening with either athletes or the bets being placed.